Hey everybody, this is my 20 long open topped office tank and it is sorely in need of a water change. You can see how low the water level is, but you can probably also tell how tea stained and tannin stained the water is. Now I don't have a lot of wood in this tank. This piece over here you can see on the right is the only bit of woodwork I have in the tank. But the roots of most plants, or at least I assume it's most plants, I think it's most plants, produce tannins as well. So even if you don't have woodwork in your tank, if you've got plants in your tank, you're probably going to develop that tea-stained water eventually anyway. So that's why this tank is so dark when I've only got that one little piece of wood over there. And that piece of wood's been in water for years and years now. Probably, it's one of the earliest, probably the first piece of wood I ever purchased for a 10-gallon tank when I first started keeping fish. So 7 or 8 years maybe that piece of wood's been in the water, and yet look how tannin stained that water is. It's really, really dark. Anyway, that's just a side note, kind of popped into my head as I was standing here looking at the tank for a moment. The one thing we're going to do is check the nitrates. It's been a while since I've done a water change. It's been several weeks probably. The last time I did anything to this tank, it was simply topping the water off rather than an actual water change. So today it's going to get a water change, and I'm not going to top it off first. I'm just going to do a water change from right there, and I'm going to take a 5-gallon bucket's worth out of it. So that's probably going to bring the water level down to about here. It's going to be a significant water change, and I will probably wind up putting 8 or 9 gallons back in because of the low water level. We're going to fill it all the way back up. So we are going to check the nitrates. We'll talk more about that later. I've been kind of keeping an eye on the nitrates in this tank in particular because of that German blue ram you can see right there. They are said to be very sensitive to nitrates, and I've been kind of doing a pseudo experiment to see whether or not that's true. And so far I'm finding out that it doesn't seem to be. But we're going to check the nitrates, and I don't know if we're going to do anything with this temple plant. I've kind of just given up worrying about this one. It's fallen over. I do have a couple of rocks in there. I tried to put one this way and one that way, so it kind of gave it a pyramid structure and it just obviously didn't work. So I might just pull that out altogether. I might try to pile some rocks around it to get it to stand up straight. I don't know. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm actually just shooting this opening sequence now to get it on video, and I'm actually going to be doing the water change a little later in the day, and I don't know what I'm going to actually feel like doing by the time I get in there, so it's hard to say what might actually become of it. But we're certainly going to do the water change, and we're going to change out the filter. I'll pull the filter intake off and get that cleaned out. I always have gunk growing in this tank for some reason in that filter intake, so that's just part of the filter maintenance when I do water changes. And then we will probably also get the glass nice and wiped down and cleaned up. So there you go. There's a look at your before. And there's your after. So it is feeding time. Everybody is down at the far right end of the tank. They think I'm in here to feed them rather than to shoot video. So we'll have a quick look at it while it's nice and clean and clear, and you can see that there's nothing floating around in the water. And then I'll go ahead and throw a pinch of food in there, and we'll kind of do a sort of feeding video along with the follow-up on what I did when I got in there to clean it. Basically did everything I said I was going to do except clean the glass. I didn't do anything to the glass because it doesn't really need it. I'm sure if I wiped it down we would see some improvement. It would be a little clearer. I doubt that the glass is completely free of any kind of growth, crud, algae, whatever gets on there. But whatever, it's clear enough that I'm not too worried about it. Didn't mess around with the plant at all, but the bucket that I dumped the water in still had the plants in it from the last time I did a water change and maintenance on this tank. And I did pull out a piece of Creeping Jenny, and so I just draped that back in there for the heck of it, just to put it in there. And other than that, there's not a lot to talk about. I did do a nitrate test, and for all that time that it was sitting there, that is not as bad as it looks. It always comes out looking more red on camera than it really is. Plus the light we have here is a 2700K light, and it gives it a very sort of orange effect and really highlights how red that is. So that is definitely at the very upper limits of what I would call the orange color, and we're getting into the red. So I put it around 40 parts per million. May not quite be there, but again, with that color, and it's not entirely easy to see, it could be just slightly over, who knows, but it's in that neighborhood, 40 parts per million-ish. So it was getting up there after quite a while. I really kind of wish this tank was a little more heavily stocked. I am actually planning on putting some more fish in here, but they're in quarantine right now, and I'm dealing with ick in my quarantine tank. So even though the fish that are waiting to come in here do not have ick, they are in a tank with fish that are covered with it, so obviously they've got to wait it out too, and everybody has to wait and see until the ick is over. But I do have a bunch of neons in quarantine right now, so we're going to put maybe 6 or 8 neons swimming around in this tank. And I say that because I would like the nitrates to get up a little higher and get up a little closer to where some of my more heavily stocked tanks are, and where this one actually used to be. I don't know why the nitrates don't seem to get up as high as they used to in this tank. I don't know if I'm just sort of unconsciously feeding it less or what. I know I did used to have a bunch of neons in here, and they've all died off now. It's really warm water in here. I'm still debating whether I'm even going to put the neons in here. It's probably too warm for them, so I might find some other type of fish that does well in warm water, but also does well in a fairly small tank. And we're going to, add something else in there. But at any rate, my nitrates in this tank used to regularly get up to maybe, 60 parts per million. It was definitely a red vial. And one of these days, I'm going to get around to talking about nitrates. But specifically with this fish, I'm kind of giving it some time. I want to see the overall effects. It's been about 6 months now, and you can see how good and healthy and beautiful and vibrant the fish looks. So clearly the nitrates are having no short-term effect, or I say short-term, over a period of 6 months. Generally, when you look at, studies of nitrates and stuff, when they look at the short-term effects, they're looking over about a 96-hour period. And even when they look at the long-term effects, they're only looking at a few weeks generally. So the fact that this one's been living happy and healthy and looking good for 6 months now, leads me to believe that all of the hype I've heard about how sensitive these fish are to nitrates is really not true, which falls right in line with what I believe about nitrates anyway. So we will be shooting that video where I discuss this in more depth. I'm just a little reluctant to do it because it's one of those videos that I know is going to cause controversy, and they always get on my nerves. I get a lot of views from them, but I get a lot of headaches from them and comments that I don't feel like hassling with and so on and so forth. So I'm reluctant to shoot those videos that I know are going to come across as somewhat controversial, maybe against the grain of what everybody else says. But, I see what I see, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So we will be talking about nitrates in that video coming up here pretty soon, and you just got a good example of how this German blue ram is happily swimming around in about 40 parts per million right now, or it was anyway. I don't know what it is now. As I explained, we did the 5-gallon removal, and then I probably put about 7 gallons back in, so the nitrates are probably quite low at this point. So there you go. Make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss anything I got coming up, including the video I was just discussing and any updates on this, my open-topped office tank. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you real soon in the next one.